Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. In a week since our last main show. Hope you and yours are well. It's been actually relatively quiet this week. I mean, we've had weeks and weeks and weeks of all sorts of things happening, and we've had lots of topics and not been able to get through them all at times. But this week's been a bit quieter, but still plenty to talk about, plenty. And hopefully plenty will keep you entertained and informed. So without further ado, let me get to my crew on board here, my dear friends and panel, the wise people. Starting there in just back from Sri Lanka, our Yvonne down there in the borders. Hey, Yvonne, my dear friend, how are you?
I'm great. The weather is beautiful. I've swapped sunshine for sunshine.
Yeah, but not quite Sri Lankan heat though.
No, I can see the sun, but I can't really feel it. So, but that chill breeze was most welcome.
There you go. And to add to our international, we've got there up in North Dakota, our Coatbridge Cavalier himself, Mr. Boswell. How are we, Philip?
Very good, very well. Thoroughly enjoying it. It's glorious here as well, finally. Summer has arrived in North Dakota and it is glorious. I can see why the people live for the summer here. Everybody's outside. We've been to the lakes, probably spin up to Canada in a few hours actually, and go and see Winnipeg since I've never been. So it should be fun.
Winnie who?
Aye, Ewan, come on.
Great stuff. Great to have you, Phil, as always. And of course, up there in Clackmannanshire, our Eva. Eva, my dear friend, how are you?
Hi, Roddy. Oh, having a great day today out in the garden. I was out there early this morning and some of my neighbours were having a sing-song. And judging by the standards, I think they've maybe been up all night as opposed to have just got an early rise this morning. So it's all go in Clackmannanshire.
Good. He sounds my type of guy. I want to be his pal. He sounds fun. Anyway, I was saying it has been a bit of a quiet week, but before I do that, a wee bit of social thing. Everyone, congratulations are in order for you. I believe you're about to become a foster mum.
That's right. We've gone through months of interviews and it's been really quite intensive and extensive and intrusive as well. But yes, just this morning I was told that I am going to get an unaccompanied minor from one of the boats that's come over from Calais. So I'm really looking forward to meeting this new person. I can't say too much about it though, because there's a lot of confidentiality around the whole and sensitivity as well, because these kids have been traumatized, and so it's going to be a very interesting, if not a bit harrowing, process. But the refugees are just treated so badly by Westminster that I just wanted to do something to show that we're not all Suella Braverman. Who I found out here's a piece of useless information. She was named after Sue Ellen in Dallas. Swellen, the drunk. So quite why the parents named her after Swellen, I've no idea. But anyway, that was a nugget of useless information for our wonderful army of listeners.
Yeah,
and I love all the...
Talking of that, I had a pal called, his Christian name was Beckett. And the reason he was called that was because his mother had been watching A Man for All Seasons, and he was named after, of course, Thomas Beckett. That was it. And as I used to say to him, you're lucky your mum didn't like Dumbo. It would have been quite a moniker to carry about. But talking of foster children, Phil, at the beginning of the week, Nicola, I want to be alone and have time to, in her hands, come out to tell us she's thinking about fostering. I hear she's wanting 3 children, a boy, a girl, and a non-binary. I don't know if that's true or just some cynic. What did you make of it?
Well, firstly, let's give credit to fostering children and those who foster kids, and hats off, doff my cap, Yvonne, respect. Because the traditional family values, which are the best environment for children, or have been proven to be the best environment for children, as in 2-parent families growing up, are in decline in the West. 2 parents, one carrying out the traditional father role and another the traditional, more important, probably mother role, is without doubt the best chance kids get. And the studies, the social science studies, are all there, and on every metric kids perform better if the father remains in the kid's life. So what do we do about that? What do we do about the diminishing respect, support and practice of the traditional family? Who advocates for the kids? These are tough questions. The government, right? Well, but not the ideologically possessed Scottish government for me. More of a grandiose council, if you ask me, vainglorious at that. So 2 parents, can they be the same sex? Well, theoretically, yes, that might help the situation, but we don't know. This is a relatively new phenomenon. How are we going to fix this? How are we going to fix this for the kids, you know? So the same studies have not been done over a long time period as they have with alternative families rather than the traditional family. But we need a solution for the kids' sake and for our society's sake. But we have to find some way to make it better for the kids. And our government indeed has an obligation to do so. But what does that look like? That's a massive question. The Greens and the current Scottish Government, SNP, Nicola's cabal, given what I know about her, I mistrust her. I mistrust her motives in this respect, which should be a terrible thing to say about any potential foster parent. But we have to ask these questions as a society to get to the truth of what the fostering parents' objectives and what the fostering is about for the children's sake. Yvonne just stated she went under severe scrutiny, as all foster parents should. So I would highly scrutinise Nicola more than others, given her form with virtue signalling, limelight retention, and me. I'm afraid it's a terrible thing to say, but I believe it to be true.
Well, I certainly know, speaking as a grandpa, I wouldn't want any of my grandchildren being watched by someone who didn't and could not define a woman, and who believed in all that science. I wouldn't want them watching my grandchildren or teaching my grandchildren, I've got to be honest. But I suppose that accordingly, I think makes me a transphobe, as they say. But it's just the way. Eva, what did you make of it on Nicola's intervention? I mean, again, congratulations to Yvonne, who with the best of intentions. But what did you make of Nicola coming out of the shadows again to talk about this?
Well, as you know, I'm a family and child law specialist, and I give credit where it's due. I certainly do take my hat off to Yvonne and wish her the best in her endeavours. I'm sure that she'll transform that young person's life, absolutely. I have reservations about Nicola Sturgeon's position. Obviously, we all know that she was a lawyer before she became a politician, and I think that she knows that we know that she has to be vetted and scrutinised before she could ever be approved as a foster carer. I think the spectre of the police investigation probably renders her unable to apply for that status at the moment, and that will remain the case until that investigation is over one way or another. But where I do think Nicola did well was appointing the independent care review, because there have been very serious issues for the care experienced people around amongst us for very many decades. The Kilbrandon Commission led to the setting up of the Children's Panel System, but unfortunately there were some parts of Scotland, especially my own area, Clackmannanshire, where the care experience was not what it should have been. And Nicola is well aware of a major scandal here in 2010-11, which was exposed in a case I was in, and Sheriff David Mackey presided, where social workers did a very bad job. Several were found to have lied and to have fabricated case notes, etc., to the detriment of the children in their care. But thankfully, Sheriff Mackey was able to put some of that experience and a lot of other experience and knowledge that he had over the years as a sheriff to the betterment, because just in the course of the past couple of weeks, his review, independent review of the children's panel system has been produced. And that arises from the promise, which in turn came from the independent care review. And what Sheriff Mackey suggests is a complete overhaul of the entire children's panel system and a different method of arranging events and how panels are managed and who sits on panels and how children are looked after and how their views are made known, is to be innovated if all of Sheriff Mackey's recommendations are approved. I would strongly urge Natalie Dawn, Marie Todd, etc., all the ministers who have anything to do with this case, to make sure that the review is fully implemented and fully funded without unnecessary delay. I don't want any more can kicking, because we've had enough of that already for these people, and they need to see the job done ASAP. So I'm not overly interested in whether or not Nicola Sturgeon gets to foster. I think it's another of these promises, like the time she said she was going to accommodate Ukrainian refugees within her home. That didn't happen either. So probably just another attempt to hog the headlines and divert attention away from the murkier aspects of, or the potentially murkier aspects of her conduct. But for Scotland's children, there are good things ahead if the Scottish Government prioritises their needs and finds the money for out of somewhere for that kind of work, because they're always able to find money for the other stuff that you alluded to earlier. They should find the money for this. Scotland's children deserve nothing less.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I said at the start of the show, Yvonne, it's been a quiet, relatively quiet week politically. It's getting to the end of term, and I think both our MPs, of course, it's Whitsun down at Westminster, they're closed for the Whitsun holiday. And it seems that they're in the last days of their school, looking forward to their holidays here and holidays. It's been quiet, but what has persisted is the fallout from the SNP's decision to hold their special conference on the same day as the All Under One banner march in June. That's not going away. That's actually growing arms and legs. I had a blog post on Friday, a guest post from James Montgomery, which has received numerous amounts of comments from people saying, they have to change the date, they have to get with the programme. This is not going to stop. It's not going away. The voters are unhappy that SNP are running away from the Yes movement. You're on mute.
It's a big opportunity for the SNP to show to everyone that they listen to the membership, and that would be to move the dates for their conference, and that would confound their critics and shut those of us up who say the SNP does not listen to its grassroots, because loads of SNP people I know just cannot find a defence for that decision to hold the conference on the day of the All Under One banner march. And they've done it again. They've repeated the crime again in Skye, I think it is, where there's another All Under One banner march, and they've I think you said last week that there's no such thing as coincidence, and there isn't. And this was one of the most spiteful, high-handed things that the SNP have done, which is, it's the sort of BS that we expect from Starmer's Labour. It's that sort of level. And for the SNP to sink to that level it's embarrassing and it's shameful. And even the most ardent SNPer is running away because they just can't defend You know, it's getting more and more difficult to defend the SNP, and you see this in the on Twitter, and of course, it's a vindication for people like me who jumped ship a long time ago because we felt that there's something not right with this this party.
There is, Phil, a growing separation of those who support independence and those who support the SNP. We discussed this last week. It's about a 12% gap. From a purely political point of view, this if you're in charge of the SNP or you're one of the SPADs, you're saying we've got 12% of our supporters, you know, potential supporters, they're likely to be on that march. They're all under one banner. So is it not better to engage with them rather than infuriate them by holding an event against it?
Yeah, yes, it is. But we repeat ourselves because the Scottish Government continues to do the wrong thing, make the wrong choices. If your objective is Scottish independence for our people and our nation, what it does, it betrays the lie, and it tells us that the objectives that the current incumbents and leaders of the Scottish Government do not share with the majority of those of us in Scotland, that they are in the hands or under the control of those who would keep us on our knees and those who would keep control of Scotland's wealth and its resources. So no, while Humza and Nicholas Cabal continue, there has been no change. It's the usual kind of superficial. It's a facade. It's painting the outside of the house. It's still the same house with the same people in it. It still does the same thing. It still carries out the same function. And until we have root and branch clear out in the SNP, they cannot be trusted to take this country and its people forward. So no change in reality, in policy, in people. Why would we expect any different from the same people who have been running it since Nicola took over?
Yeah, as I mentioned, Eva, a blog in my site, Heroes or Zeros, it's got an awful lot of reaction from the public because there's anger in this, but it showed also in BBC debate night. The lady now who's quite famous, she's become the Heron who gave Jim Fairley, who I've always viewed as sort of one of the good guys, but gave him his horoscope. Techie, do we have that clip with the lady is berating?
I cannot believe that there are SNP politicians so delusional as to think that people vote for them because of how they've governed well. You get our votes because you are the official party of independence. You have not delivered. You're going to get one heck of a shock at the next election because we are tired of it. Absolutely tired of you. Not delivering, not delivering, not delivering.
Couldn't have put it better myself, Eva, could you?
Fantastic. I was obviously punching the air watching that, as were very many other people. But you see, we know here, and I think most of our viewers know too, that the reason why people are frustrated and angry is because literally every single day we see Scotland failing to thrive, Scots people failing to reach their potential, people worried sick about the cost of living and the fuel crisis and a whole host of other problems that we know about. And we can't tackle those properly unless and until we've got complete, comprehensive economic levers which come only with independence. And that's why it's so scunnering to see SNP politicians talking about, for example, defending devolution. Matt Drakeford was here the other day, and he and Humza had their joint press releases about the defence of devolution and how important that is. Since when should a Scottish SNP First Minister be allied with a Welsh Labour First Minister talking about defending devolution? Because for every moment that Humza's doing that, it's a moment that he's not spending campaigning for Scottish independence. Some people want us to be independent because it's a natural state. Some folk want Scotland to be independent because we used to be and because we're an ancient nation. But a lot of people want us to be independent simply and solely so that we can look after ourselves using our own resources and not be bled dry by our neighbour who takes our resources and gives us back little more than pocket money. We cannot allow our government to continue to sit on their hands, have pretendy conferences now and again, and not shift the dial remotely towards an electoral event when we get the chance to vote for freedom. And that was, I think, why folk were so incensed with Jim Fairley. I have a lot of time for him. I would call him a friend. I was particularly impressed when he was one of the rebels in relation to gender recognition reform. But he has got to get the leadership of his party to understand that they need, and Scotland needs, and the entire movement needs, a united front against the Better Together campaign. Because Better Together knew what they were doing the last time. We've said it so many times. They will try it again whenever it is that we get another chance to go for it. And at the moment, if we are sitting at 53% support for independence, then part of that 53% comprises ALBA members, ALBA supporters, Independence for Scotland Party members and supporters. And without us, it won't be a 53% lead. It would be a lot less. So it's time for country before party, not the other way about. And that, I think, is probably why folk are so frustrated, because we don't want to see a position where there are partisan opportunities. We want to see a position whereby Scotland is the priority and independence is the strapline for every independent supporting party's campaign. Not vote SNP to be stronger for Scotland, or, you know, stop Brexit on the side of a bus, but vote for Scottish independence by voting for a single Scotland United candidate in every constituency at the general election. And this time next year, we would be negotiating our independence, the terms of that settlement. Not the fact of whether or not it happens, but the deal.
On that topic, Yvonne, that I keep going back to that guest blog I had on Friday, but the point was made quite clear from the SNP point of view. If they don't agree to a Scotland United, then they're actually, again, for the third time, telling the Yes movement to get lost. But from their own point of view, this is madness. There's so many of their seats are only held by a few percentage points. And if they then say to the ISP and to the ALPA party, no, we don't want to, you do your thing and we'll do our thing. If ALPA starts standing in seats, they could start losing shed loads, because we would split the vote. It's bad news for them, but they're leaving ALPA and ISP with no choice if they say, well, no, we don't want to unite with you. They as political parties, they're in business to be elected. So they're left with no choice but to then stand against the SNP. So just from a purely tactical point of view, would they not be as well uniting as, and, you know, being the largest party in the independence, as the lady referred to, you are the largest independence party. They would have more muscle. It's almost suicidal what they're doing.
It's really frustrating. It's like diving into the water to save a drowning friend, except once they get hold of you, they pull you under the water as well. And you realize if you don't kick them hard enough where it hurts, they're not going to let go. And, you know, you can, it's really sad, because many of us from Alapa were in the SNP, and there's an awful lot of respect for what the SNP was. And at the moment, it's acting like a kid on smack, and there's nothing, you know, you've got to give it tough love to be able to bring it out of the malaise it's in. And it's awful, because if we were all together, what a tremendous force we would be for independence, which is the goal. It's the goal of everybody who tunes into Prism. It's the goal of everyone in the Alba party, everyone in the ISP. It's the goal of any independence-minded person. But I have to say, I wonder at how genuine the SNP is over independence. The D word keeps coming up all the time. Humza Yousaf can't get by a day without mentioning devolution, and it's like an affliction. And the more they use the word devolution, the more they are diluting our cause. But I'm quite relaxed in a lot of ways, because I genuinely feel as though the Alba party has turned a corner in these last 2 or 3 weeks. And Alex Salmond is now regarded fully as the de facto leader of the independence movement. And, you know, he's had a really traumatic journey, being dragged through the courts and all of this. But I really think that his reputation has been more than restored, because people who know the backstory now don't just see a great independence leader, they see a man who has kept his dignity and pride and drive for independence intact. And I think that that's genuinely recognized now. So in some ways, at the prospect of an election, whether it's Holyrood or Westminster, I would say bring it on. And, you know, let's get candidates out there for constituencies and get the whole show up and running. There are a lot of nervous people in the SNP at the moment, predominantly sitting down in London, wondering how long they're going to be there, because they know in their heart of hearts it's payback time. And everything they've said about everything derogatory that they've called voters bigots for not going along with this crazy GRR scheme, all of that, it's payback time now. And we're no longer looking at the SNP as the one vehicle to get us over the independence line. There are many vehicles out there now. You know, I've said it before, when Sturgeon became First Minister, there wasn't a single independence party out there other than the SNP. Well, they're no longer the only show in town. There's a lot more, as somebody said, new kids on the block, and Alba being one of them. And Kenny McCaskill and Neil Hanvey have shown us what two gobby, belligerent MPs can do. And you just wonder if we can take over Westminster, the huge swathe of Scottish seats. I think it would be the Speaker Lindsay Hoyle's biggest nightmare come true if those SNP seats were replaced by Alba seats, because my God, they would know that Scotland has arrived. And I think about 2 or 3 weeks of active Scots, belligerent Scots, would, I think they would come to us and say, where do we sign to get you out of our club? We want rid of you.
I wish. Phil, well, we've now had 16 years of the SNP in government, and they've had, I suppose you could say also, they've had 8 years of unbridled success as well in Westminster. Have they become too involved in their own wee bubble to not notice what's going on, not to read the signs, read the room and say, and they can be so blasé about ignoring the yes movement and treating it as actually treat it worse than they treat the unionists.
It's contemptible, and it's the behaviour is traitorous, and I say it deliberately because the skill and the ability to recognise and read the room is what got SNP to where we got to. These people were still in the SNP, some still are in the SNP, like Lloyd, Quinlan, and many others. But what's happened is they are no longer driven, and it's returning to the same thing, they're no longer driven by a will to serve the people for the primary objective of Scottish independence. So the skill sets were still there, or certainly people are capable of delivering that within the SNP. But the problem is, what you've got is a whole row of nodding dogs, children, ideologically possessed, those who kowtow and follow the instruction from their leaders in this small, very small cabal. Many have spoken about this. We could name them, and maybe we will one day name the small cabal that's been running SNP. But they have been calling the shots, and they are being controlled themselves. They've been told what to do, what to say, how to perform. They're being blackmailed. They're being controlled by a very, very resourceful and capable British government. Let's not play down the achievements of what the Secret Service, MI5, 77th, and all of these people have achieved over time. They used to, I mean, when the Europeans originally looked at Brexit, one of the things they feared was the potential for great British diplomacy. And I don't mean in terms of Great Britain, I mean British diplomacy used to be revered, it used to have a very good reputation. And they were shocked at just how bad it was under Brexit. The demise, in one sense, was there, but this kind of, when it's in their interests of those who really run the country, and Brexit is in the interest of those who really run the country, so they didn't really put their efforts into withstanding that. But retaining Scotland and its resources is in the interests of those who really run the country, and therefore the focus of these departments, divisions, and entities within the control of the British government are fully focused on the biggest threat to the Union, which remains Scottish independence. We've went over it many times, and it's out there if you want to read it. It's all there of how they infiltrated the IRA when that was seen and perceived as the biggest threat to the British Union. So no, Roddy, we are more than capable of doing this. We took SNP to where we got to, and then when we handed it over to Alex, and obviously Alex didn't see this coming, or he wouldn't have done it. I thought it was genius at the time. I think we all did. We were shocked. We thought how brilliant it was. And I've said it before. What happened was you had Alex suffering the slings and arrows. He was like a pincushion, and he trained Nicola coming up behind him. He just stepped aside when we lost, and she punched right through. And the impetus continued. We grew. We got the 56. We got the massive 125,000 membership. We were on a roll. And we were primed and ready to go with all of the key pieces in place. So you hand from a grand master chess player to some buffoon. It's like letting a pigeon play chess, the classic joke, because Nicola took over, and her chess strategy was to knock all the pieces over, shit all over the board, and strut around as if she'd won the game. What a clown. But that she failed us. That she failed. Instead of grandmaster chess or fifth dimensional chess, what we got was a pigeon playing Scottish independence chess for us. What a disgrace. She should hang her head in eternal shame.
We've said, Eve, all along, everything's in the favour for independence if we put together a proper campaign. And we've said it, the Constitutional Convention, etc., go for it. But you can tell that when the union's getting worried, when the numbers are going in favour of independence, because what do? They go to the crypt, they turn the lights down, and they bring out the clunking fist arse. Can you stick it up his leg?
Which is really 19th century nationalism, that wanted a nationalist state with all the trappings of nationhood, a separate army, separate currency, separate borders. We've got to move on from that to a 21st century patriotism, where we recognise that people love our country, our history, our traditions and our institutions, but they understand that in an interdependent, integrated, interconnected world, we have to work together for the common good. Otherwise, by dividing, we will hurt ourselves separately.
I'm trying to control my language here, Eva. I can't stand that man. But the thing is, he's talking about, be British. That's patriotism. Bad nationalism if you want to have a normal country. He spews the same nonsense and has been for years. We can do it together and we're better together. And how can you have a separate army and a separate this, separate that? The man is the Tomb Tabard. It's embarrassing. I don't see there's any benefit. The rumour is that there was more people on the stage than was in the audience. It's quite pathetic, isn't it?
Well, there are, as far as I am aware, there is no footage of the audience at all. So I guess that you're right, and that there was very little of an audience. But this was I think a kind of joint event between Gordon Brown's think tank, which is called Our Scottish Future, and some other organisation called the Alliance for Radical Democratic Change. And the other people that are in that are the Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham, the West Yorkshire Mayor Tracy Brabin, and Anna Sarwar. Now, I've read a few of the press releases, and all they're really talking about is some woolly aspiration towards greater democracy. And what's highly unfortunate is that Scotland, as an ancient nation, Scotland as a previously independent country, is being compared with Greater Manchester and West Yorkshire. Honest to goodness, Gordon Brown has got the cheek to stand there as a Scotsman and have no shame at seeing his country so reduced and traduced. It is pathetic. I really wonder about that man's sanity at times. But it's very, I suppose, offensive if you're proud to be Scottish, whether or not you're a unionist or support independence. It's just pathetic for your country to be compared with a region or a county or a city in England, but it's par for the course. Gordon Brown should have learned a lesson a long time ago, that every time he comes onto the stage, he makes a fool of himself. But he's like Nicola Sturgeon, he can't stay away. So I don't think that his performance will do anything other than good for Scottish independence, because he just turns people off. But we must be doing fine, as you say, for him to be back out again. I don't know what the latest opinion polls say, but I think Keir Starmer's beginning to make a fool of himself again. So are some of the others around him. Scottish Labour aren't going to make much of a dent in Scotland, though, as long as they continue to behave the way that they are. They're yesterday's people, despite what the polls say, and the real issue for Scotland is the Constitution. It's not, are you going to get a Labour government or a Tory government? If we don't vote for independence, we're going to get the government that the English vote for. That's abundantly clear. So I'm pleased to see the movement in Wales, and I'm pleased to see what's happening in Ireland, and I really want to see the Scottish independence movement getting together in a united fashion, and then we really can make events like Gordon Brown's the other night complete political history, and he can go back into the political crypt that he should remain in.
Yeah, Yvonne, the ridiculous thing is the man has got a degree in history. He must know the history of his own nation. He behaves like that. But here's the thing. It was noticeable that the BBC didn't carry this. It wasn't in the mainstream media. It's as if they've decided, even the Brits have decided, nah, Gordon, you have no effect anymore.
Well, he is like the the man in the crypt. But also, let's remember, he is a war criminal because he conspired with Tony Blair to launch a criminal war that created more than 1 million widows and orphans in Iraq. He funded it. He was the guy next door. He was the chancellor who listened to the arguments. He could have turned around and said, no, we can't afford it. I'm not funding it. We're not spending billions on bullets and bombs. And he knew it was a criminal enterprise. And he knows that the crimes are not over. You know, what a lot of people don't realize is that Gordon Brown is one of the worst types of Zionists that there is. He's a patron of the Jewish National Fund, which is an openly racist organization which works to dispossess the Palestinian people. And let's remember, you know, he likes history, so do I. Let's remember that Brown gave one of the most racist speeches to the Israeli parliament, praising Menachem Begin, the proud butcher of innocent civilians in Deir Yassin, and the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, the Nakba, which Israel launched in 1948, is still continuing today with Brown's blessing. So that man should be in prison. He shouldn't be swanning around Scotland lecturing us all on the evils of independence. You know, like the Palestinians, we deserve independence. We deserve to be cut away from the shenanigans that are going on in Westminster. But instead, in Palestine, especially, innocent victims suffer and die, and he couldn't care less. You know, he's just a man driven by his own self-importance. And he, when he was Prime Minister, he was the endorser of the precursor to the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which was the European working definition of anti-Semitism, which made it racist to point out Israel's apartheid structures. And Gordon Brown has a lot to answer for. And he's not a nice man. And we shouldn't be listening to him and digging him up and dragging him out like Marley's ghost is, you know, he's had his day. He's like any corpse, starts to get rank after about 4 or 5 days.
Couldn't put it better myself. It would help Phil if he even had the decency to give us a mea culpa about his vow. Instead, it was the big bad Tories, and yet he's come out with the same bilge several times. How's it going to be any different? He has no power. He has no power base. He's not an elected official. How is he going to make it happen? Because it was notable in this latest visit from the crypt, Keir Starmer wasn't about. And without his say-so, and he's already made it clear that what he's going to do is he's going to take Scotland's resources, or renewables, or oil or gas, and put great infrastructure into England and reflate the English economy with Scottish resources. So apart from anything else, does he not have the dignity to understand that he's just making a fool of himself?
Well, he's still trying to earn his knighthood. You know, he thought he would have got one for the vow. And let's remember what that was. Conservative Labour and Lib Dems designed strategy to cheat the people of Scotland of their independence and their freedom. And, you know, remember, it was as close to devolution as possible. Devo Max, a federal state like Germany. We were going to get all these powers, and this vow was carried with the Daily Record, whose author was subsequently employed by the SNP. Not under Alex, I hasten to add, obviously by Nicola, and those who kowtow to that same god. But Brown, is embarrassing. Very briefly, I could retell a wee quick one. I was in Coatbridge, Main Street, and Tom Clark was one of the safest seats in Scotland, and there was a few Guardian videos made on it. Very, very good, I have to say, very open and very honest, which I was surprised from the Guardian, but respect. But there was one, it was closed, the street was kind of quiet, and there was a whole bunch of them up one end of the street. And I'm standing, and it'd been raining, I had a long black raincoat on and a black suit and type thing with yellow and stuff. And I'm standing at one end, and they all start coming down. And I stand out in the middle of the street, and I kid you not, I did this because there's guys in the pub took pictures. I'll have to dig them out. And I put my greatcoat either side as if I was going to draw on them. And my old teacher was one of the Labour, Mr. Dempsey, a lovely, lovely man, one of the Labour stalwarts, and a good man, a good socialist, a decent human being. And he was coming up towards me, introduced me to Gordon Brown. And Gordon Brown, being an ex-rugby player, did what all these arrogant egotists do. He dropped his shoulder and gave me a nudge by, and I'm laughing at him. I'm laughing at him. It was surreal. It was absolutely surreal. But anyway, no, this guy's a clown. He screwed up. He was a bad government. I mean, let's not forget what he did with gold. The sale of UK gold reserves was a policy pursued by the Treasury, right? And it was late. I think it was 2000. For a couple of years, when gold prices were at their lowest in 20 years, following an extended bear market, right? And some people call it Brown's bottom, or the brown bottom. But because we sold it, and it takes its name from Gordon Brown, who decided to sell about half of the UK's gold reserve in a series of auctions, and they were worth about $6.5 billion, accounting for about for a substantial amount, about 13 billion of foreign currency net reserves. So there's various estimates for the cost of that decision to the British taxpayer, from 2 billion to 7 billion. At the time, this was a shambles. Added to the rest of the stuff, to the war crimes, to the fact that he took over from Blair, who was a populist, but Brown was never popular, never was, never should be, and let's face it, never will be.
No, while the BBC and ITV were ignoring him on the mainstream media, were ignoring Gordon, the BBC came out with this great programme. They thought they'd ask some young people what they thought about independence. So they got a couple of just randoms off the street. The BBC led us to think, do we have that techie? I'm not sure if we do, where these two random people, they forgot to tell us. One was a Labour staffer and the other was a Tory candidate, but the BBC, whoops-a-daisy, forgot to tell their viewers that these people who were anti-independence, they just implied, Eva, that the youth are actually against independence too. State broadcaster, they're a propagandist.
Oh, absolutely. And, nothing could be further from the truth, because we know that the youth are very much in favour of independence.
Huge number.
Right, that's why everybody wants the youth vote. But, there's the Young Scottish Nationalists, there's Alba Youth. There's a lot of young people very interested in politics and certainly very keen on constitutional politics. It was just the BBC mischief making as usual. Can I just pick up on something else that you would almost think was mischief making? One of the things that you never thought you'd live long enough to see. It was the other day, was it First Minister's Questions? And Hamza Yousaf was arguing with somebody, I can't remember who it was that had asked him a question, and they were having their usual sparring. And he referred to the great John Smith and the great Donald Dewar. Why would an SNP First Minister say that there was anything great about these men? Why does he mention Labour leaders in the context of a Scottish National Party First Minister's Questions? It just beggars belief to me. And I think that in line with how the BBC have been performing recently, you're kind of shaking your head on a daily basis, wondering what's going to happen next. But, the BBC have had their debate night this week, which was great for the cause of independence. Question time the week before, with Alex Salmond on it, was fantastic for independence. So let's not berate the BBC for everything, because some of the stuff that's happened recently has been really pretty heartwarming from an independentista perspective.
Yeah, when you talk about whom's, why would you say that? It goes back to our friend Lloyd Quinnan. He's right. Holmes has got no political core. He's playing a role. He's in a role, and he's trying to appease people, and he's trying to appease the media, and he's trying to appease the opposition. He's trying to do everything except get bloody independence. That's why they lack the core. But what, you know, the world's going to hell in a handcart, Yvonne, and the latest one that really got me this week, really got me angry. Should I just say NHS Lothian and a gay pride march at a hospital? What the hell is that all about?
Well, again, it all goes back to the GRR, doesn't it? And these transgender, bender, whatever they are, trying to force us all to accept an ideology which is alien to science. It's alien to the instincts of most feminists. It's just alien, and they are marching through this hospital trying to force their ideas, dangerous ideas, on all of us.
It's a children's hospital. I should hasten to add, it's a children's hospital.
Absolutely. But, you know, there's worse coming down the line, Roddy, because I was talking to a friend of mine in London who told me, and of course, whatever goes on in London usually ends up heading up here eventually. And there's this furry fandom subculture, which is aimed at kids who want to be animal characters, you know, some anthropomorphic thing it's called. And basically, my friend was telling me that there's a child at her daughter's school. She's aged about 9 or 10, who goes to school wearing a long tail because she has told everybody she thinks she's a kitten. She's a cat. And I've been looking it up, and I'm just thinking, my God, this is coming our way next. And these barking mad parents who indulge their children's fantasy are going as far as buying cat litter trays for their kids to pee and God knows what else in. And it's called the furry fandom. And it's this subculture which is emanated from these loony, well, I shouldn't say loony, it's really, it's belittling people with mental issues, because body dysmorphia is a mental health issue. So maybe I was wrong to say loonies, but this is what's coming down the line next. Children going to school dressed as cats and dogs and rats and pole cats and whatever you want. And no doubt teachers will have to, God knows what sort of pronouns you'll use. But anyway, that's coming down the line. It's heading our way, and we ought to knock this SH1T on the head before it gets over the border. Hello?
You're on mute, Roddy.
I forgot. The dog's barking next door. So I hit the mute button to stop the dog. I forgot. The thing is, Phil, about this, it's just wrong. And I mean, I'm as liberal as the next person, as open-minded. If whatever people want to do behind closed doors and they're consenting adults, go on with it. Knock yourself out. Have a fun. Have a great time. But to have these people marching through a children's hospital as if it's normal, and no doubt some of them will want to get into the wards to say hello to the children, to pretend they're nice people. I'm totally opposed to this. This is, it's the same as anything. If you've got a religious belief, I'm very happy for you. I don't have one. But don't try and force it on me or my kids or my grandkids or anyone else. And it's just wrong that they're marching in a children's hospital?
Yeah, it's already been said. Yvonne's nailed it. We've talked about this many times. These ideologically possessed. It's all well and good adults to continue to be allowed to do and live the way they want to live, as long as it doesn't harm anyone else. But this is children we're talking about, and there's a duty of care owed by all adults in all societies, but particularly government and representatives, to ensure that that is not abused, and the vulnerable within our society, and that includes women and girls, they are protected, including their safe spaces. It's all been said, and that's not been done by the Scottish government at the moment, and that's the rub. That's the problem and the beef I have with them, that we all have. So no, not good enough. Not good enough.
You were talking, Eva, earlier about Mark Drayford being in town, and he was. And one of the things that's been going on just now is the deposit return scheme has hit a roadblock with the UK government. Now, is it a question of they're selling it to us? It's an attack on devolution. They're playing up this big devolution thing, or is it just badly written legislation, or is it a bit of both? Which would you suggest?
I think it's at least a bit of both. If I've got this right, the Scottish scheme as proposed would mean that glass taken in under that scheme would only be ground down and used as sand. It wouldn't be recycled to be made into glass bottles. So that seems to be, if that's right, then that seems to be very much an own goal. The other difficulty appears to be that the Scottish Government didn't apply for the exemption that they would need from Westminster early enough. If they'd have applied for the exemption and argued about that at a much earlier stage, they'd have probably been on firmer territory than they are now. As it is, you've obviously now got a lot of retailers who are talking in terms of compensation if the scheme doesn't go ahead. And you've got Lorna Slater, who is utterly clueless. She doesn't know if it's going ahead or not, but she's never really known very much about it anyway, as you would gather if you watched her answering questions within Holyrood, because whenever she's asked a question, it's a pre-prepared answer and she reads from a script. So I would imagine that there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes to see how much it's going to cost the Scottish Government in compensation if it doesn't go ahead. And what they should also be thinking about is reviewing curbside collection of glass, because there are some local authorities who stopped that quite a long time ago. Clackmannanshire stopped a few years ago, so we don't have curbside collection. We have to go to central points with glass for recycling. So that system actually works quite well for a lot of people. Perhaps the answer is that glass does come out of the DRS. We have curbside for glass, and the DRS is everything else. But again, I'm no expert in this. You can just look at it from the outside and see that it looks very much like another shambles, an own goal. The Scottish Government have allowed Westminster to run rings round them and to shoot arrows at them as and when they feel like it. And it's Lorna Slater and the Greens wagging the tail, wagging the SNP dog, and yet again, Scotland is a bit of a laughing stock because A, the Greens are inept, B, the Greens are driven by ideology, which when you look at it on the ground, is not effective, and C, Humza Yousaf, like Nicola Sturgeon, is enthralled to the Greens because he doesn't have the political skill or the wit or the guile or the advisors to give him the courage to say to the Greens, enough is enough, we're going to run this show ourselves. He thinks he needs them for a majority. Actually, what he needs to do is ditch the Greens and again, pick up the phone to Alex Salmond and get the independence campaign on the road, because if we were independent, and if the amount of effort that's gone into the GRR or the DRS or all these other daft schemes, if all that energy and commitment had been dedicated to a proper independence campaign 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, Lorna Slater or whoever could have been recycling glass or plastic bottles or tin cans till kingdom come, and there would have been nothing Westminster could have done about it because we would have been going our own way. So the quicker that we're getting that show on the road, the better, and the less we'll have of these fiascos when they just can turn our country into yet another laughing stock.
Indeed, to the Greens, and I mean the Greens are meant to be about the environment, Yvonne. and saving the planet. And here we have this woman, Lorna Slater, who is an action looking for somewhere to happen. She recently hired a private boat to take her to Rum at a cost of 1,200 quid with all her lackeys with her. She could have done the same trip using the Caledonian McBrain ferries for 75 quid or something like that. This is Greens, meant to be energy conscious.
Yeah, she's supposed to be the Circular Economy and Biodiversity Minister. And it was such an own goal, taking a chartered catamaran to visit the island, which is served by the government's ferry service, CalMac. I mean, what the hell? And she said, oh, well, I was doing it to maximize time on the island for during a visit. That's the sort of crap excuse that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle come out with when they take a private jet to go off on some green initiative. Every bad thing that has happened to the SNP, the majority of it is as a result of the incompetence or the arrogance of the Greens. And Humza Yousaf, to his eternal shame, described this relationship as worth its weight in gold. Well, it's not. He's bought a pig in a poke, and it doesn't matter how much lipstick you put on the Greens, they'll always remain this nightmare porcine vision. Apparently she was going to Rum to discuss the future of Kinloch Castle, a former Edwardian pleasure palace, which is at risk of deteriorating as it's no longer being used. And it'll be another crackpot scheme. You know, they shouldn't even be going on embarking on these missions until they've sorted out the ferry contract. The islanders must be so fed up with the way that they've been treated over the whole ferry scandal, and then Dopey Slater's recycling scheme. I wish somebody would just recycle her, throw her. In fact, it's time somebody threw the Greens in a bloody recycling bin and nailed down the lid. So,
talking of ferries, Phil. Yeah, talking of ferries, Phil. I see South Eust are about to start suffering from the gross negligence of the government over ferries. It's really getting terribly embarrassing.
Yeah, and Angus Brendan has made plenty of suggestions, none of which have been all fallen on deaf ears. But that's very familiar for us. All you need to do, viewers, is to search through a Scottish Prism, Barhead Boy Ferries, and you will see the 3rd of April show from 2022, which lays it all out. And it was your special guest that was on there, and obviously it was me and Ian that were on that one latterly to discuss it, was one of the world's leading ship designers and architects, Stuart Ballantyne, a Scot living in Australia, Glaswegian, lives in Adelaide, and he did the ferry out to Kangaroo Island from Adelaide, amongst others. And he gives an in-depth insider's knowledge on the entire Caledonian McBrain, Ferguson Marine, Scottish Government ferry fiasco, and a way out for them back then. Too late now. And you can determine for yourselves whether it was incompetence, stupidity, or downright corruption that sees us having, 2 inadequate ferries built in Turkey, while 2 more gather rust and dust in Port Glasgow. And there was and remains an alternative to this, a valid, viable, cheaper, workable alternative. And he offered free advice is usually not worth an awful lot, but in this case, this is one of the world's most renowned experts. And then on top of that, we got Alf Baird, Professor Alf Baird himself, a marine expert. He was Professor of Maritime Business and Director of Maritime Research Group at Edinburgh Napier, PhD in Strategic Management and Global Shipping. He's the one that mapped out the the motorways of the sea philosophy that's been adopted by many countries, not Scotland, because we're not independent, and not Britain. We don't have a ferry port that can accommodate the large ferries in Scotland. Absolutely appalling. And look at his work on what we can do at Cockenzie, the old power station site. So no, it's all there. It's a shambles. It's one of the biggest embarrassments, one of the most patently obvious embarrassments when they were told, they were absolutely told categorically that this would not work, and here are viable alternatives, and yet on they go with their ideologically possessed nonsense. And it's as if someone's pulling the strings and telling them how to screw up, how best to screw up Scotland, and they're doing it.
Yeah,
It's a disgrace.
It is. You sometimes wonder if it is on purpose. It's so ridiculous. Yeah, we're running out of time. So before we do go, Eva, last thing I want to cover is Humza went to Falkirk Football Club this week and offered that I wanted to see more fan involvement in the game. And I'm a great lover of the game, as you know. But the government gave him a grant for, was it 350 grand or something, for supporters to buy it. Now, if all the other clubs, if I was in any of the other clubs, saying, wait a minute, can we get some of this? It seems another headline grabber, but it's not universal, is it?
I'm going to try and keep a straight face. It's called the Fan Bank.
A loan
of £350,000 to help communities take ownership of their local sports clubs. I wonder how long it took them to come up with this policy, and what actually is the point of it. Because in terms of the Scottish Government budget, 350 grand isn't very much, but we're constantly being told that we're skint. Goalposts have been moved repeatedly in relation to, for example, school meals. What happened to the National Energy Company? Why have we not got a national house building company? We know that poverty is probably one of the biggest drivers of inequality, the biggest driver of inequality in Scotland. We know that poverty arises from having insufficient income and your expenditure's too high, and a lot of that comes from the simple cost of living, particularly if you're living in poor housing. So where is the work being done in relation to developing big ticket policies, not just independence, but house building, reviving the economy, doing things that people need, whether it's increasing income by way of having pilots on universal basic income, doubling the Scottish child payment, giving all children under, say, the age of 18 free access to all sports. You could do a lot of things like that pretty quickly if you just had a bit of imagination. But to just dole out money for communities to buy into football clubs seems terribly short-sighted when all the big stuff is languishing and is either failing, like, for example, the reverse wind auction, where we sold that window for, I think, was it not less than a tenth of its value? If we'd have sold that for the right amount of money, we'd have had a lot more revenue available for house building or school meals or childcare or the NHS. So these wee sticking plasters, such as the Fan Bank, will hit the headlines for a day and then they'll be forgotten about in the main to just make Humza feel a bit better. And that's not actually the reason why he's in the job in the first place. Correct.
Well, we're coming to the end. I've got two questions I want you under viewers' questions, Yvonne. So no one knows anything what's coming. And you put the first one up from Alexander Brown, Techie, which and it says, is there a specific reason the SNP has abandoned the not-for-profit energy company? Is it still a viable proposition, or is that ship sailed as well? What do you think, Yvonne?
Well, we've been robbed over the energy. That is for certain. We have the highest energy prices in the whole of the UK, and yet it's Scotland that's providing all the energy that's feeding and looking after our friends south of the border. It's a valid question, and I think it is something which is going to be a major talking point in the next Holyrood elections, and why the SNP sold us all off so cheaply. You know, the wind energy, the renewables, we've just been treated like patsies. I mean, I remember the days when real robbers had the decency to wear a flaming mask.
I can say that you're right, it probably will be a big topic in 26 at Holyrood, because Alipa's party policy is to have a not-for-profit energy company, and unlike other people, when Mr. Salmon says he'll do something, he does it. So if you want a not-for-profit energy company, folk, you know what to vote. And the last
he's a great negotiator as well.
Yeah. The last question of the night, Techie, can you put up Andy Gardner's question, which for you, Phil, regarding free ports were getting foisted upon us. Can they be reversed after independence, which I'm still hopeful of in my lifetime, particularly now that my new party, Alipa, is getting more popular by the day. He also compliments us on the show. But can we reverse the free ports when we're independent, Phil?
Yes, of course. If you control your boundaries, your borders, then you can, and there'll be doubtless caveats within any setup of free ports to avoid that if we allow them to go ahead. But we can do it. It's our country, of course. On just a quick one on the state-run energy company, I worked with Statoil, so absolutely that is a huge shambles. The potential is staggering. There's now Equinor with Statoil plus Statoil Hydro, and they've got a 1.5 trillion sovereign oil fund. So yeah, let's have that, and they badly let us down. But for once, I agree with a guy I worked with in the independence campaign, Ross Greer, on this one. What is it? The UK government, their special area is supposed to be where you develop economic growth with different regulations, taxations and customs. So it is a con, because there's a big split in the SNP and the coalition. The Greens, I believe, have the right of it. The Scottish government signed a deal, 52 million, I think, with the UK government, and trying to get Rosyth into it in Fife. Ross Greer said that his party would have nothing to do with it, and why? Well, he said they're a greenwash. So he talked about the low carbon emissions, but there's something very serious about this, and he's got a point, because I've looked at free ports around the world and operate in some of them, or have done. What free ports are, and this is a quote from Ross, are a really effective way to give tax relief and to throw public money at multinational companies who are already doing their best to avoid tax. And he cites the last time that the UK had free ports. According to the UK government, they only created a quarter of the jobs that were promised, and that was a huge public expense. Internationally, free ports are associated with crime, money laundering, smuggling, and low wages. So stuff that in your pipe and smoke at SNP. It ain't going to cut it, guys. It's not good enough. We want an independent country where we control our taxation, and every barrel counts, and a national energy company, and control of our own borders and our own resources. That's what's required.
Thank you for that. And thank you, everyone, for your contributions. As always, they've been gratefully received, and I hope our viewers will enjoy them as much as I have listened chatting to you. We've come, sadly, to the end of another show, and that's us until next week, folks. Unless there's a midweek special, yet to be decided. We hope so. Depends on some people getting back to me. And also, I'm going to be speaking to you all soon. There's something we're up to in Prism, and we need your help. And over the next week or so, I'll be making that clear what we need you to do to help us. But until we all see you again, you and yours, please, take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.